The moment she slammed her purse onto the counter, I knew this wasn't a normal customer. Pump 4, full tank. Bill the HOA, Beverly Lang barked already, turning away like the argument was over. I smiled. Card first, ma'am. That's when she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of me. This gas station is denying essential services to HOA residents, she shouted, loud enough for the whole lot to hear. Send police. People stared. Cars slowed. Someone started recording. And as sirens echoed down the road, Beverly smiled, calm, confident, almost excited. That's when it finally clicked. She didn't want free gas. She wanted a reason to destroy my job and prove the HOA owned more than just her neighborhood. Beverly Lang wasn't just another angry customer. She was the HOA president of Ridgeview Meadows, and she made sure everyone knew it whether they asked or not. The moment she stepped into the gas station, the room tightened. Beverly had that present stiff posture, clipped voice, eyes that scanned for weaknesses instead of exits. She spoke like every sentence was already approved by a board meeting that only existed in her head. To her, rules weren't boundaries. They were weapons. As HOA President, Beverly had built her reputation on control, issuing fines over mailbox height, lawn shades, wind chimes, parking angles. She didn't negotiate, she enforced. And she genuinely believed that title gave her authority everywhere she went, not just inside her neighborhood. So when I told her she had to pay for gas like everyone else, it wasn't just refusal she heard, it was defiance. Outside the store, Beverly transformed instantly from customer to commander. Phone raised, voice loud, she framed herself as the victim and me as the enemy. Not a cashier, not an employee, a threat to the community. That was her pattern. If someone didn't bend, she escalated. If someone embarrassed her, she punished. If authority didn't side with her, she manufactured it. And standing there watching her smile while dialing 911, I understood something dangerous. Beverly Lang didn't want free gas. She wanted obedience. And she had decided to teach it using me as the lesson. Beverly didn't wait for the police to arrive to resolve anything. She turned the parking lot into a stage. Phone raised high, voice loud and theatrical. She began narrating her own version of events to anyone who would listen or record. According to her, Ridgeview Fuel and Supply wasn't a private business enforcing a basic policy. It was a hostile entity targeting HOA residents. According to her, I wasn't a cashier doing my job. I was abusing power. Cars slowed as they passed. One pulled in, then another. Phones came out. Beverly paced back and forth in front of the pumps, pointing at the building like it was a crime scene. She wasn't speaking to me anymore. She was speaking about me carefully, strategically, planting words like discrimination and essential services into the air so they'd stick. Don't shop here, she warned a couple, walking toward the door. They target HOA residents. That sentence landed heavier than I expected. This wasn't yelling. This wasn't a tantrum. This was reputation damage happening in real time. I stepped outside and kept my voice calm. You're welcome to buy gas. You just need to pay first, she laughed. Not nervously, not angrily, confidently. Then she turned back to her phone and said, "See, intimidation." That was the moment the cold realization hit. Beverly wasn't trying to solve a problem. She was building a record. Every phone pointed at me, every car slowing down, every comment she planted. She was creating witnesses for a story she planned to tell long after this moment ended. About 15 minutes later, Beverly came back. This time she brought reinforcements. Another SUV rolled into the lot and 3 women stepped out wearing matching HOA t-shirts. Each carried a sign in one hand and a phone in the other. Justice for HOA residents. Stop community abuse. Free gas is a right. My stomach dropped. This wasn't spontaneous outrage. This was organized. They lined up near the entrance, photographing everything, the pumps, the trash cans, the security cameras, even me through the glass like they were collecting evidence. Then 2 men in cheap suits walked in. Before they even spoke, my coworker Tessa whispered, "This is fake." They introduced themselves as representatives of something called the Community Consumer Protection Agency and demanded to see service policies, cashier training documents, and community compliance forms. No official badges. No legitimate credentials, just confidence, the kind people use when they assume no one will challenge them. They thought authority was a costume. Tessa dismantled them without raising her voice, exposing them as frauds in front of customers. When they finally retreated, humiliated and scrambling, I thought maybe Beverly had overplayed her hand. I was wrong, because she wasn't done escalating. At 11 a.m., my district manager's boss walked in. No phone, no signs, just printed emails and a cold expression. "This is blowing up," he said. The HOA is making noise. The Chamber of Commerce called. Insurance called. Then he said the words that hit harder than anything Beverly had done. If this doesn't stop, I'll have to suspend you. I felt my hands start to shake. Not because I was afraid of Beverly, but because I was being punished for doing nothing wrong. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't refused service. I hadn't insulted anyone. I had simply said, pay first. And now, my job, my livelihood was on the line because someone powerful didn't like being told no. That was the moment something shifted inside me. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This wasn't ridiculous. This was dangerous. If I stayed quiet, I'd be sacrificed to make the noise go away. That's when Tessa leaned close and said, if she wants a stage, we give her the right audience. By the time Beverly came back again, this had stopped being a protest and turned into a production. The signs were professionally printed now. No glitter, no marker. Someone had spent money. Beverly stood on the curb with a megaphone delivering her lines like she'd rehearsed them all morning. Every sentence sounded legal. Every accusation sounded serious. She wasn't yelling anymore. She was performing for the record. Then a sheriff's cruiser rolled into the lot. No sirens, no rush. Just Sheriff Cole stepping out slowly, scanning the scene like a man already tired of what he was about to hear. Beverly marched straight toward him, megaphone raised, launching into claims of discrimination, harassment, and denial of essential services. Cole waited until she ran out of breath. Then he asked one simple question. Did you pay for the gas? Beverly lifted her chin. HOA residents shouldn't have to. Cole nodded once. Then, this isn't a crime. Before she could pivot, another vehicle pulled in, black, polished, unmistakably official. The mayor stepped out, and when Mayor Huxley began speaking, the energy shifted fast. He didn't argue with Beverly. He contextualized her listing past HOA, overreach, false complaints, and abuse of authority. Phones stopped filming her. They started filming him, and Beverly, for the first time that day, looked unsure. Beverly tried to regain control. She raised the megaphone again, talking about rights, unity, and standing strong, but the crowd didn't respond. The moment had passed. Then her own people began to speak. One HOA board member stepped forward. We never voted on this, he said. Another added, she told us there was a safety emergency. The murmurs spread quiet but deadly. Sheriff Cole pulled out his citation book. Beverly Lang, he said, evenly, yesterday you misused emergency services. Today you're obstructing a business and blocking traffic. As he wrote, Beverly's face drained of color. This is retaliation, she snapped weakly. No, Cole replied. This is consequences. Then came the final blow. Henry, soft-spoken, long-time HOA board member, cleared his throat. I call for a vote of no confidence. The words hit harder than any citation. Beverly spun toward him furious, but the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. Phones were still recording, but now they were recording her downfall. When she finally turned and rushed to her SUV, no one cheered. They just watched. And in that silence, it was clear Beverly Lang hadn't lost a protest. She had lost her authority. When Beverly's SUV tore out of the parking lot, no one followed. No cheers, no shouting, no victory laps. Just silence. The kind that settles in after something breaks beyond repair. Sheriff Cole stood in the middle of the lot, citation pad still in his hand, watching the tire marks fade toward the road. He didn't rush. He didn't posture. He just exhaled slowly, like a man finally finished dealing with a problem he'd seen coming for years. People stayed. Phones stayed up. No one was ready to leave yet. That's when Mayor Huxley stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. He simply spoke clearly, deliberately, knowing every word would be replayed by nightfall. For the record, he said, looking directly at the cameras, this business acted within the law at every point. He gestured toward the store, toward me. There was no discrimination. No denial of service, no wrongdoing. A murmur moved through the crowd, not outrage, not excitement, but recognition. The mayor continued steady and precise. What you witnessed today was not advocacy. It was an abuse of authority. That sentence landed harder than Beverly's megaphone ever had. People shifted their weight. A few nodded. One woman whispered, finally, and for the first time since this started, the narrative was no longer spinning. It was settling. Sheriff Cole stepped in next, not to argue, but to document. He explained calmly and without emotion that Beverly's 911 call from the previous day had already been flagged as misuse of emergency services, that the protest itself crossed into obstruction, that private businesses are not required by any statute to provide free services to anyone, HOA title or not. No legal jargon, no dramatics, just facts. Each sentence stripped away another layer of Beverly's performance. Phones that had been pointed at the store now angled toward the sheriff, toward the mayor, toward the paperwork. Then Henry walked forward. He wasn't loud. He wasn't confident by nature, but he held a folder like it weighed something. This, he said, raising it slightly, is the emergency HOA meeting notice. Camera zoomed in. Effective immediately, he continued, the board is calling a vote of no confidence in Beverly Lang as HOA president. That's when the crowd reacted. Not chaos, not shouting, applause. Measured, controlled, decisive. I felt my chest tighten, not with triumph, but with disbelief. Less than a day ago, I was being threatened with arrest over gas. Now, I was watching an entire power structure begin to dismantle itself on record. As the applause faded, something else became obvious. Beverly wasn't here to hear it. She had already fled, and in doing so, she lost the last thing that ever protected her, an audience willing to believe. People began lowering their phones, not because they were bored, but because the story was finished. The mayor turned back toward me one last time. "You handled this professionally," he said. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, because this wasn't the kind of win you celebrate. This was the kind you survive. As the crowd slowly dispersed, folding chairs, deleting angry posts, driving away, the parking lot returned to what it had always been: a gas station, a road, a quiet edge between a town and a neighborhood. But something fundamental had changed. Beverly Lang didn't lose because someone shouted louder than her. She lost because her power depended on noise, and the moment the noise stopped, there was nothing underneath. Standing there, watching the last car pull out, I realized the truth of it. This was never about gas, never about rules, never about an HOA. It was about what happens when someone mistakes authority for ownership and finally gets corrected in public with witnesses who don't look away. The parking lot didn't explode after Beverly disappeared down the road. It exhaled. People stayed for a few minutes, standing around like they'd just walked out of a movie and weren't ready to admit it was over. Lawn chairs folded. Protest signs were quietly lowered and stacked against bumpers. Phones replayed clips that had already been uploaded, shared, and commented on in real time. Then, little by little, engines started. Cars rolled out, and just like that, the spectacle dissolved. Ridgeview Fuel and Supply returned to what it had always been, an ordinary gas station, sitting on the edge of an HOA that had forgotten where its authority stopped. Same crooked ice freezer, same faded signage, same dent in pump 3. But I didn't feel ordinary anymore. Inside, Tessa leaned against the counter and let out a long, shaky breath. "Well," she said, "I think that officially beats the hot dog refund incident." I laughed, but it came out quiet. Not relief, exactly more like my body, finally realizing it wasn't under attack anymore. About an hour later, Sheriff Cole came back through the door. No notepad, no questions, just a quick nod. "She's done," he said plainly. "Board's already moving. And for what it's worth, you handled that the right way." He didn't stay. He never did. But that sentence mattered. By evening, word had already spread. Not Beverly's version, not the live stream hysteria, the corrected version. The one backed by authority and facts. The town hadn't just watched a meltdown, they'd watched a correction. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves, quiet, procedural, and far more damaging than anything Beverly had staged in public. The first call came that evening. Sheriff Cole didn't sugarcoat it. Beverly Lang's 911 call from the day before had officially been classified as misuse of emergency services. Not a warning, not a note in a file. A citation with a fine attached and a formal record created. She knew better, he said. That's what makes it stick. That mattered, because Beverly wasn't just some angry resident. She was an HOA president, someone who had spent years threatening others with consequences while assuming she'd never face any herself. The second hit came the next morning. The HOA board convened an emergency session without her. For the first time in years, Beverly wasn't running the meeting, setting the agenda, or controlling the narrative. And once she wasn't in the room, things moved fast. They reviewed documented complaints, not rumors, paper trails, false fines issued without board approval, HOA funds used for personal printing, and community outreach that never benefited the community. Threatening letters sent under HOA letterhead without legal review. Repeated attempts to coerce businesses outside HOA jurisdiction. Each item alone might have earned a reprimand. Together, they formed a pattern. By noon, Beverly Lang had been formally removed as HOA president, effective immediately. No appeal window, no temporary suspension, a full removal voted in and recorded. Then came the part she'd never expected. The HOA's insurance carrier was notified. And when insurers hear words like false claims, public disturbance, and abuse of authority, they don't debate, they investigate. Coverage was frozen pending audit. Legal counsel was brought in not to protect Beverly, but to protect the HOA from her. That's when the fines turned into liabilities. The city issued an additional citation for organizing a protest that blocked access to a private business and disrupted traffic. Another fine, another paper trail, and finally, the quietest punishment, but the one that cut deepest. Every complaint Beverly had ever filed against residents, businesses, and neighbors was flagged for review. Some were dismissed outright, others were reversed, several were refunded. People who had lived under her rule for years suddenly realized something powerful: she hadn't been untouchable. She had just never been challenged. Standing there behind the counter listening as the consequences stacked up one by one, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt something steadier. Because Beverly Lang wasn't being punished out of revenge, she was being corrected by systems she had abused for years now, finally turned toward her. And, for someone who had lived by wielding authority without accountability, that was the harshest penalty of all. The last consequence didn't arrive with paperwork. It arrived quietly. 3 days after the protest, the bell above the door chimed near closing time. I looked up expecting another curious local, or someone asking for gossip. Instead, it was Beverly Lang. No sunglasses, no clipboard, no megaphone, just Beverly. She stood there for a moment like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside anymore. Her posture was smaller, her movements careful, as if every step had to be negotiated with reality. I withdrew everything she said finally, every complaint, every report, every letter. She slid an envelope across the counter. Inside was a signed statement retracting every accusation she'd filed against me, the business, and several others. I was told if I didn't, she added quietly, the HOA's lawyers would. There was no anger in her voice, no performance, just exhaustion. For the first time since this started, Beverly Lang wasn't speaking from authority. She was speaking from consequence. I lost my position, she continued, my reputation. Most of my allies. She paused, then said the one thing that mattered. I thought control meant safety. I was wrong. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't forgive her either. I simply listened because this wasn't a victory lap. This was a reckoning. She nodded once, as if accepting something final, then turned and walked out without another word. No dramatic exit, no screeching tires, just silence. And that silence said more than any apology ever could. After that, things changed in ways you don't notice all at once. The HOA meetings got quieter. The fines stopped appearing. People stopped whispering Beverly's name like it was a warning. Weeks passed, then months. And Ridgeview Meadows slowly became just a neighborhood again. One evening after closing, Tessa and I stood outside watching the sky darken over the pumps. You ever think about how close that got? She asked. All the time, I said. Because the truth is, this whole thing could have ended very differently. If I'd raised my voice, if I'd backed down, if I'd tried to win instead of just standing my ground. But I didn't, and that's what mattered. This was never about gas, never about rules, never even about the HOA. It was about what happens when someone believes authority means ownership, and finally runs into someone who refuses to move. I didn't defeat Beverly Lang. She collapsed under the weight of her own power once it was finally seen clearly. And I learned something I won't forget. You don't need to match chaos to survive it. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need power to stop abuse of power. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand still, tell the truth, and let the noise destroy itself. Because when the shouting fades, truth doesn't echo, it remains.